process that's happening. Now, dependent origination has many, many forms. The standard format I've written out here, and this is 12 links, and we'll go through roughly. You don't need to understand all of these terms or what they do. Today we're going to focus on one specific part of this, because this sutta has an interesting analysis of the first link. But just in brief, the standard format is 12 links. But when you look in the suttas, actually there's a lot of variations to this. Sometimes they have 9 links, sometimes it has 10 links. There's one with 24 links. There's some with 3 links across the top and 4 coming down. So it can vary a lot, depends on how you analyze it, how you want to break it down. So by this word dependent is not cause. And this is quite important in Indian religion, Indian philosophy. The word cause is one kind of dependency. So let me give some easy examples. The dawn depends on the sun coming up. Does the sun come up first and then there's dawn? Or is there dawn and then the sun comes up? You can't really say which one is first, right? They come up together. So some kinds of dependency mean you depend on that thing. The dawn depends on the sun coming up. And the sun coming up depends on the dawn. But you can't really say which one comes first. So they are codependent. Let me give another example. How did you come here today? You drove. So you came by car. So you depended on your car to come here. But your car did not cause you to come here. Right? So dependency is not the same as cause. A doesn't cause B, cause C, cause C, D. It's what you used, what you depended on. Now, your dependency on a car, your dependency on attending this class depends on me being here. If I'm not here, no class. If I am here, there's a class whether you come or not. So you have total dependence on me being here. On the other hand, for your car, you don't have total dependence on the car because you could have walked. I don't know how far you can. You could have taken the bus. So the dependence of you coming here for this class on me is different because that's vital. Your car is non-vital, nonetheless you depended on it. Right? So this idea of dependence in Indian philosophy is not the same as cause. Cause actually is one kind of dependence. Right? By the way, you'll get more out of me and out of the class if you interrupt and ask questions, if you're not sure. Just in this small environment with just a few people, if you are not sure about something or you want to ask a question or point something out or disagree, just cut in. You're very welcome.
Okay. Just on the elements of freezing and the process is nearly the same. Because
no, freezing is not the process because that's what's there in that moment.
It's there in that moment. But the process you will go through.
Yes, you see A, B, C, D. You see a movement, like a chain of events. But today we're only looking at process, the process analysis. And this is one of the 3 or 4 different kinds of analysis that was given in the original scriptures. So, this process that comes has been argued about since the time of the Buddha. People have argued, what does it mean? How does it work? And there are different interpretations of it. I'm going to give you my interpretation, because I think my one's right, that's why it's my interpretation. But just to bear in mind, there are different interpretations of this process. Also bear in mind that if I say, you came here tonight, you used your car, we can't say that you came here first and then you used your car. We can't really say you used your car and then you came here. The coming here and using your car was kind of at the same time. So you can't really say which one came first, right? So in the same way, I put this line here. Some of these terms on different suttas will get switched. So for example, these two terms, which I'll explain briefly in a minute, often they get switched around. There's one example where this term here moves down to number 4. So this is what has confused scholars for a long time, is that sometimes they come in different orders and different sequences. So it makes it tricky to be interpreted. But if we understand dependency, well, you understand that actually sometimes you can't say what comes first, right? So, there's one last thing about causation, is you can't ever really say the cause of something. The cause of you coming here, was that the advert? Like, well, you were already looking at the advert. Is it the Buddhist fellowship? Well, you're already interested in Buddhism, so was it your mum who taught you Buddhism? Well, what caused her to like it, to be interested in Buddhism? Did she meet a teacher 60 years ago? What caused him to go and talk to her? So in Buddhism, well, in Indian philosophy, this idea of cause is not usually mentioned. We talk about dependency, not causality. Usually. On the other hand, if you kill an arahant, that will be a cause of you being born in a hell realm in the future. If you attain to jhana and high concentration, this is a cause for you to be born in the heavenly realm. So some things do go by cause, but generally we just talk about the dependency. Right? Joining this class, you're depending on your eyes and your ears, right? So, but your eyes and your ears aren't causing you to join the class. Okay. This particular, I've written down the most common formula for dependent origination. We don't have to understand all of it in detail, but I'm going to give you the general gist. So avijja, always translated as ignorance, and this is the term we're going to talk about this evening. Actually, the class this evening is not going to be too long. I want to keep it reasonably short and get on to this topic, because this particular sutta has an interesting analysis. Sankhara is the most debated word in Buddhism. And whatever I say about it, somebody will say something else. There are different interpretations of this word. It goes crazy. The main, or the neatest actual definition that I found in the suttas, by the way, this is the topic of my dissertation, which I finished a couple of weeks ago. After, actually, I was working on it for 19 years, and I was in the university for 12 years.
You're slow like that.
No, I needed a visa. That's why I was doing it. I was in university getting my uni visa, and if I finish my dissertation, I lose my visa. So I had no impetus to finish. Then I lost my visa anyway. And I went to get a new visa, and then they said to me, no, you're in university. So they made me quit the university in order to get the new visa. So then I was out of the university, and then I went back just to clear up some things. And he said, no, I tell you what, I'll backdate your thesis. So I'm like, well, I'm back in. So the last 2 months I spent running around like crazy trying to get through all the paperwork. The thesis was easy, it's the form filling that's difficult. So this is the topic of my dissertation. Let's run through very briefly the rough way that this works, then I'll say how it works according to psychology. Sankhara, the best definition that I found in the suttas was the 3 kinds of action: body, speech, and mind. So sankhara means a willing or an intending to move. In philosophy, I would call this intentionality. And intentionality in philosophy doesn't mean that you intend something. In philosophy, intentionality means that for any moment of life, of something you can experience, there has to be an object towards which it's pointed. For example, it's impossible to feel angry without being angry about something. You can't feel love without feeling love for something. You might argue this point a little bit, but it's called phenomenology. It's a philosophical standpoint. So any moment of experience always has to have some object of that experience. And that's called intentionality. And I like that as a psychological or philosophical definition of this term. In the sutta, it says sankhara is an action of body, speech, or mind. So it's some willingness to move, to engage. Why do you want to engage? Why are you sending your attention out? Because of ignorance, which we'll come back to. So, when the mind moves, when you start to move, then there is vijnana or consciousness. I'm going to say cognition. Actually, cognition covers about 5 of these terms. Cognition would come down to about here. But what this means is vijnana and namarupa are said to depend on each other, like 2 sheaths of hay leaning on each other. So each one supports the other one. If you remove one of them, it falls. If you remove the other one, it falls. So these 2 are said to lean on each other. So again, this is where they're dependent on each other. They're not causing each other. So, I want to consider these 2 together because many, many suttas actually put these 2 together. You have name and form at one end, you have consciousness at the other, and then you have phassa, contact with them, produces experience. So what this means is, of these 2 terms here, what this means is when you are somewhere, you're in a room or you wake up, what will happen is your attention will go to one particular thing. For example, I say to you, what's the time? And you go, and you look at the clock, and you say 8 o'clock. Your attention has gone to the clock. That becomes the salient feature of your consciousness. When you look at a clock, you don't just see the physical matter, you don't see just like the material, right? You know what a clock is, you know what it's for, you know how to read it, you know how to interact with it. So the clock is not just a physical thing, it's also a mental thing, right? So this is what was called nama and rupa. And nama and rupa mean name and form. But it's important to know that name and form means one thing. They're not separate things. So name here, or nama, means the mental side, and rupa means the physical side. So the clock has a physical side, and it's round, and it's black, and it's white, and it has some fingers that move. That's the physical side. The mental side is you know what a clock is, you know what it's for, you know how to read it, you know whether you like it or you dislike it, you know whether it's right or whether it's wrong. If the numbers go 1, 6, 9, 4, 3, 2, you know the clock's wrong, right? So, in a moment of experiencing, one thing will arise in consciousness. And that one thing comes complete with both mental and physical side to it. Everybody clear enough on that? So, what your psychology will do is will cut out of your experience one thing to bring into salient experience. Meanwhile, everything else is relegated to the background. And then something else will come into salient experience, and then the clock goes into the background. Right? So you turn around, you look at the clock, you tell me the time, and then there's an itch on the back of your head. 1 second you're at the clock. Then this Namarupa disappears, and you're scratching the back of your head. And then after that, somebody's phone goes. Who was it yesterday? You turn around, and then that's your salient feature, right? So your mind will jump from object to object to object to object. And will really only pay attention to what's in the foreground being presented to your consciousness. Right? Do you want to have a little break and I'll show you the Skoda video? Did anybody look up yesterday? You looked up? You looked up? It's fun, right? Interesting, just... Anybody else you didn't look up? I don't know. Can we put my computer on?
Advertisement.
Where's our...
She's there.
Okay.
She's there.
Yes. Yeah, we need audio too. I'll plug it in. So, is the sound off?
Nonetheless, in the time, chain transmission is likely to be the simplest to get right.
All right, okay. Anne, the chain won't fit on the sprocket. You're going to need to find another one, slightly wider links.
Slightly bigger.
Yeah.
Bowser, Shen, we're just looking for another chain. The one we got at the moment doesn't fit, so if you just
Links
find
are too
anything.
small.
Yeah, the links are too small.
Over the wall, the mustachioed major's ordering one final reconnaissance trip through the scrap heap.
To test just how much attention the attention-stealing design of the new Skoda Fabia actually steals, we left one parked on this ordinary road in West London. We wanted to see if its sharp crystalline shapes, bold lines and lower, wider profile would attract the desired level of attention. Will the 17-inch black alloy wheels stop passers-by in their tracks? Will the angular headlights attract the attention of other road users? Will a crowd gather to check out its fresh, sporty look? Well, not quite. But did the attention-stealing design distract you from noticing that the entire street has been changing right before your very eyes? Don't believe us? Have another look. Did you spot the van changing to a taxi? How about the scooter changing to a pair of bicycles? Or the lady holding a pig? Let alone the fact that the entire street is now completely different. Didn't think so. So there we have it. Proof that the new Skoda Fabia is truly attention-stealing.
Quite amazing, right?
The entire street is now completely different. Didn't
So that's the street at the end. That's the street at the beginning. And you don't notice, right? You may have noticed one or two things, but to notice that number of things changing is just insane. From that to that. You don't know. Wow. Because just as much an experience of a car by hearing it. Like, if you hear your husband or wife come home and you hear the car, that's a car consciousness, even though you can't see it. Also, in Gestalt, we see the back of the car just as clearly as you see the front. So you would see, like for this, you understand the back of the board just as much as you understand the front. So the Gestalt, the object, is actually more than what you can sense. That may be going a little too far, but that's because it's my field of psychology. Yes.
Just now you mentioned that the mind is like a monkey, hopping from one thing to another. So when the mind is at one place, we are experiencing one set of dependent origination, and then something make us hop onto the next street. That's another sense of dependent origination.
Yes.
So the old sense of dependent origination dies, and the birth of another set of dependent origination arises.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do then we see it as a practitioner? How do we see it? Because as when I try to read, from Dharma, is the Buddha says that in order to cut all this aversion and all this ignorance, the first thing you cut is to look at your six senses, watch your six senses. That's how you can chop all those aversion. And then you stop hopping from one place to another.
Okay. There's the question of the insights that we are practicing is to see the process. So see that the mind grabs onto something and triggers this process. What happens if the mind doesn't grab onto anything? This is our question for a practitioner. And this is what we're trying to come to in meditation, and I will explain that here. When you talk about this, there are different ways in which you bring the process to a halt. So one of the ways was considered that all of these are going to happen anyway. But you cut, the practice is you cut here. So you may sense things, but you don't get into craving. That was one way. But usually, to bring this to a halt, you cut here at avijja. Usually. So there are different, again, this is the problem. As neat and as consistent as the Pali is, when you start to go into it, there are different versions and different answers. And the Buddha himself gave different answers at different times, so we can only struggle with that. Some people say that you were going to have this one, but you cut here. You were saying that you cut here. You can make a case for all of these. In this particular sutta, which we're going to get onto right now, this is the key term, right here. So let's put my computer on again, and we'll go through the sutta. Okay, the version, do you want to, if you're all using a printout, you can use that, but otherwise I would prefer to use the Pali Text Society because for our class here it's actually a little clearer. Okay, is it okay to use this one? Okay. So, this is a very standard sutta. It's not very long. We can get through it pretty quickly. I just want to focus on a couple of key terms of avijja, of ignorance, because it's an interesting formula in here. So, sutras, by the way, they start off with "thus have I heard," and what this means is in most probably is that the suttas were collated. So after the Buddha passed away, the word went out, hey, anybody talk to the Buddha, come to this station and we'll listen to what you say the Buddha said, and if we think it's right, we'll formalize it, standardize it, and put it into the scriptures. So that's why it always starts off with, thus have I heard, or so it is reported. So here the Buddha was at a particular place. You know, the Pali Text Society loved things like the Exalted One. They had this very Christian religious language, which I like. I like that, but it is a bit... Okay, the destroying, for the complete destroying of ill. Here the word ill is dukkha, which we normally translate as suffering, but it's that's the way that they translated it there. So yes, the Buddha asked the question. Okay, so the Buddha gets on to the main teaching. So here, a person ponders or thinks or considers. This sutta talks about it, investigates. So these are different translations for it. Investigates this suffering that arises. What is it based on? How does it come about? What causes it? So there are usually these four things are framed in terms of four questions. It was a very standard Indian philosophical framework for asking questions. So, how it arises in the world, what is it based on, how does it cease, and what is the path that brings it about? So these four questions is a standard formula. So why do we have old age and death? He comes to know that this old age and death is caused by birth. And what is it that causes birth? How do you come to know the ending of birth? He ponders on the same way. The cause of birth is grasping, or here I call craving. And so on. What is the cause of becoming, or the cause of grasping, which I wrote here as attachment? What is the cause of craving? What is the cause of feeling? That's the liking or the disliking. What is the cause of contacting of the six senses? Name and shape, remember, is the object formation together with consciousness. Activities is sankhara, which was a number 2 clause. So what is it that starts each one? Old age and death is caused by birth, birth is caused by becoming, becoming is caused by, and so on. And we go through that entire chain that we've already looked at. So that's the majority of the sutta, and is very standard, formulaic way. You see why people have problem interpreting, right? Because the sutta doesn't really tell you very much, does it? It's just really giving you those terms, like, well, how? How does attachment cause becoming? Like, why don't you tell us? All the information is missing. So that's why people argue or disagree, why you have different schools come up. So, this is the interesting part here. After going through the entire list of the 12 links in the standard link format, a person who is ignorant plans an act of merit, consciousness is on its way to merit. If he plans an act of demerit, consciousness is on its way to demerit. If he plans an act that is stationary, consciousness is on its way to that which is stationary. In the version that you were given, instead of plans an act of merit, it says, if he fabricates a meritorious fabrication. You see why I prefer the Pali text version. What does it mean if he fabricates a meritorious fabrication? If he fabricates a demeritorious fabrication? Okay. this, by the way, this is the term that we want to consider, and we're going to finish the class once we finish this short term. Okay? The sutta pretty much finishes after that anyway. So, what this sutta is talking about is the avijja, ignorance. And this word vicca means method. So if you have a method for doing something, if you have a method for welding two pieces of metal together, that's a vicca. If you have a method for making your So if you focus your mind, for example, onto the breathing, and you hold it there, after a while this process stops because the mind just stops with the nama rupa, the object. Right? And this is called jhana. This is the concentration meditation. And there are two kinds. There is what's called rupa and arupa. So, when ignorance is banished and wisdom has arisen, with the fading away of ignorance, he does not plan any act that is meritorious. He does not plan any act that is not meritorious. And he does not plan any act that is stationary. What?
No, there's no Sutta on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Need to hit source. Okay. So, this is the key parts of the entire sutta, and this is where we're going to end today. If you plan an act of merit, consciousness goes its way to merit. If you plan an act of demerit, consciousness goes on its way to demerit. If you plan an act that is stationary, consciousness goes on its way to that which is stationary. But if ignorance is banished and wisdom arises, because of the fading away of ignorance and the arising of wisdom means you know the vichara, you know the method. He does not plan any act of merit. He does not plan any act of demerit. You can also say he does not will an act of merit. He does not will an act of demerit. He does not will an act that is stationary. By not planning, not willing, he grasps at absolutely nothing in the world. Not grasping, he becomes unshakable, unperturbed. And he becomes utterly well, actually means enlightened. Parivimamsa, so parinibbana, he becomes enlightened. And then he knows this entire process is stopped. Easy, eh? So this is the a nice breakdown for avijja, ignorance, because we think ignorance is a strange term. What ignorance means is these three kinds of action. When you cease from all of these three kinds of action, then you get enlightened. Now, I can't tell you how to do that. This is our job. This is our practice as Buddhists. Okay, anyone have any question? Right. But knowing the Dharma means understanding either the process, the thread, or the breakdown. So the Dharma is the thing that we use to break the attachment. But breaking the attachment, then what do? You have to come to this motionless part where the mind returns to the mind, where it's not doing anything. Yeah. Really in this sutta here, so this is the sutta, this is why I'm bringing this sutta up. I find it, it's a very interesting breakdown of what avijja is, because usually in Buddhism, it doesn't tell you what avijja is or what you do. So what I did in my thesis, I can show you. This is my thesis, and this is the different kinds of dependent origination, some of the different formats that come, and the translations of it. Then what I did was, three-lifetime interpretation, which was a complicated thing, but came in the commentaries.
There was a lot of argument over it that it should not be 3 lifetimes, it should be moment by moment.
Yes, so this was then, here I got the momentary model. And what momentary model says is this entire chain of things happens in a blink. But there's a big problem with that interpretation. You might notice that what I've presented also suggests that it all happens in a blink, except for the last two causes, jati, rebirth. That's not a blink. It's not a moment. I would consider it an expanding, like the object can change, but craving gets a little bit more long-term, and then attachment gets a bit more long-term, and then becoming of the things that you always get engaged in is longer term. So I think the term is just expanding. And then jati, rebirth, is a longer term still. So in the way that I presented it, you would have to say this is a 2-lifetime model, which is actually the way the Tibetans tend to interpret it. Yeah. So what I did was, because I wanted to figure out all these terms, I went to each one of them, analysis of the terms, and I started with each one. So ignorance, I found all the quotations that I could find, every definition that I could find, put it together, ignorance, and then onto the Sankara and onto the 12 clauses, to pull out of the suttas every definition I could find. So this was a really interesting, one of the few definitions of what ignorance is and what to do about it. Yeah, you have to read the entire set of suttas and make notes. So I say I was working on it for 19 years. I tell you what it was. It's stupid the way it comes about, but these things happen. I had my idea of what this thing meant. And then I was working with a friend on a CD-ROM in the days when you had CD-ROMs. You don't have them anymore, but a CD-ROM about Buddhism. And most of it was connected with Buddhist art and the history of the Buddha. So we'd done all that, but 3 CD-ROMs, and one of the CD-ROMs was about Dharma. And as a central piece of Dharma, he had this 12 links, which are usually presented in a wheel with some interesting pictures. So this guy, being a multimedia guy, what he did was he made the wheel 3-dimensional. And each one of the links that you would click on, the wheel would become 3-dimensional, would come in like this, and you would fly into the wheel. So into each of these links, you'd go fly into a room and see the link in little videos and clips and things like that. So this is great. I mean, it's almost like a computer game. It's very beautiful. In fact, I should bring it and show you next year, because these CD-ROMs got buried by the Royal Foundation. But so what he said to me was all the way through the entire thing, the entire history of the Buddha, from his previous life up to enlightenment, and then after enlightenment to his death, and then all of the Dhamma. We were trying to put the actual sutta references in at every stage. And what he'd do is, if the Buddha was born in this place, I'd find the sutta reference, and then he would fly to India to the place and take 3-dimensional pictures, 360-degree pictures. So in the CD-ROM, you can jump to the actual place where it happened. Fantastic project, multi-million-dollar project. So with these 12 links, he said to me, I want you to write an explanation of what they each are. But I didn't want to put my name down and say, this is like my name on here, right? Because it's my explanation, I thought somebody will criticize me. So what I did was I went to the suttas and I looked up in detail every one of these terms. In fact, there's a lot of other terms. There's probably about 40 different terms in different versions of this. And I pulled out all of these links. And when I pulled out all of the definitions, it's like, hang on, this means something that actually is quite clear, I think. That's how it came about. It's still in there, that my original thesis, it's only like 20 pages in the CD-ROM, but that's what that's how this came about. This was my thesis, right? Well, I had to shorten it a lot, so it was about 150 pages. They made me cut things out that, yeah. You know, it's academic work, right? What I do want to do is put it all on video form, so it's nice and easy. Because it's not a complicated process. The mind picks up an object. Like you look at the Skoda and you miss the background, that's because the Skoda is your object. The mind picks up an object and gets propelled into craving, liking, disliking. It's a straightforward thing, right? I don't think it's complicated. What's difficult is getting enlightened. Yes. Right. 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 This wasn't connected with this teaching. What it meant was the Buddha taught everything that you need to know, but taught it in different ways. So the Buddha can see every way, but when he teaches somebody, he would only teach them one thing. So the point was, the story was that the blind men who went to touch the elephants, to find out what an elephant is, and some grabbed the ears, some grabbed the legs, some grabbed the tail, and they all had a very different idea of what the elephant is. So it is that people have a different idea of what the teaching is. But according to Buddhism, all of it fits within his analysis. Yeah, that was the meaning of that sutta. Anybody else have a question? Sure. So, the process is one of engaging, because objects appear and we engage with those objects. So to engage with things, you have to act. You have to be moving. If you're not moving, you're not acting, you're not engaging with anything. So there are different ways to talk about, remember yesterday we talked about categorizing things. So the usual way to talk about acting or engaging with things is by act of body, act of speech, or an act of mind, right? In this particular formula, it changes around. It's a relatively unusual format that we don't normally see in Buddhism. But here it is. When you act, it's either going to be bring you merit, it's going to bring you non-merit, demerit, i.e., it's going to brighten you, it's going to darken you, or you can make an act where everything stops through concentration. And these are the three kinds of acts you can make. This is very important because enlightenment relies on the mind stopping still, on the mind being still, but not being still because it's latched onto an object. So this is the distinction between concentration and enlightenment, right? This is why they say concentration, samadhi, will not get you enlightened. And that is consistent with the actual teaching. However, the Buddha said you should practice concentration. What happens is when you come out of concentration, at that moment, the mind is just still. It's got nowhere, doesn't want to do anything. It's very happy. So this was how Sariputta got enlightened, the Buddha's foremost disciple for wisdom. He practiced concentration meditation, and he entered into concentration, and he exited very carefully. And as he exited concentration, he would watch how the whole self starts to fire up. This process starts to fire up into being. And that's what got him out. His ignorance he realized I don't have to move. If I move my mind somewhere, then I fire up the process. Yeah. So it is a relatively unusual format, but one of the few descriptions of what avijja is and how you stop it. Yeah. Okay, you signed up for Sutta class, so that means it's going to be a little bit complicated. You're going to have some technical terms, but this is how we unpick these kind of suttas. This whole sutta that we've done, really 99% of it is just a rehash of these 12 links that you can find anywhere in the suttas. So the interesting bit was this particular part about avijja. Well, you get jhana, so I guess it is meritorious, but it's not going to. It's to make a meritorious act, you've got to do something. But in concentration, you stop, right? You stop acting, but because you're holding onto an object, so you haven't stopped this whole process from happening. You've just frozen it still, and you're going to come out of concentration. It's going to start up again. Sure. I think between 1 and 2, if you like, you can put neutral actions. But they're still actions.
Stationary has different dimensions.
Yes. Yeah. And by the way, if you're interested in the actual word is anenjang, anenyang. This is the word here, anenjang. Stationary. Yeah. And it gets translated in different ways. So in Thanissro's version, he says imperturbable. I think imperturbable, Bhikkhu Bodhi uses for enlightenment, not for an enjang. But I might be wrong about that. So here's the actual word in the Pali. So he calls choices, but you know the Pali text is better. It says action. So Sujato has in this case, I don't like his translation at all. Instead of willing an act of merit, he says, makes a good choice. It doesn't do it for me. Then their consciousness enters a good realm. Here also he uses imperturbable. But anenjang here, this is the word anenjang. So the Pali Text Society nailed it, and it's stationary. Yeah. Or jhana, concentration. Anybody else, or are we going to wrap up for the evening? If you don't have any more questions. Yes. How to stop it? Well, this is what we've been talking about, that avijja is an action of either merit, non-merit, or stationary. One does not plan an act of merit, non-merit, or stationary, remember? So this is how you do it, in the words of the sutta, so not my opinion. But when a brother ignorance is banished, the fading away of ignorance, he does not plan an act of merit. He does not plan an act of demerit. He does not plan an act that is stationary. Not planning and not willing, he grasps at absolutely nothing whatsoever in the world. And not grasping, he becomes unperturbed, unshakable, and he is parinibbana, enlightened. That's again, the trouble with the suttas is it's just told you how to get enlightened in a line. But then, like, we have to try and do that, right? Correct. So there are enlightenment is what happens when you don't do, when everything stops, when you're not making any more action of the mind. The mind returns to the mind and just knows itself, and it's there. Now you can't do that because doing is going to be one of these three, right? So that's the problem that all enlightened people have in trying to communicate. Because if he's enlightened and he's trying to tell you, he can only tell you what to do. But you have to stop doing. So this is why enlightened people can't teach. And in Buddhism, we accept that lots of people can get enlightened. They're called Pacceka Buddhas, accidental arahants. Which means they've got enlightened, but they never followed a method, a methodology. So they can't teach. So the secret to the Buddha's teaching was, he said, there are things that you can do that will help you. They're not enlightenment, but they will help you on the way to enlightenment. You can make meritorious actions. Here you have to stop from all three, but the Buddha continually said, make meritorious actions. He continually said, do concentration. You can practice your barami, improve your paramita, right? Wisdom, morality, patience, application. These are all qualities that you can develop. So the whole beauty of the Buddha's path was, he said, there are things that you can develop that will help you, but they're not the last step of enlightenment. If you're interested in this I did a video. I spent a lot of work on this video. Why is this? Don't worry, we're not going to watch the video now. But so I went to a lot of time and trouble to make this video. So I laid it out exactly what is the Eightfold Path according to the suttas. So slide after slide after slide, what these things actually are. Where does right action come into it? So Four Noble Truths frame the question. The Eightfold Path is what we have to do. The 10 paramis are things that help us. The kilesas are things that block us on the path. As we get the insights, these are observations, the three main observations, will take us to the three knowledges of past lives, karma and liberation, and these will take us to the amata or the deathless. So I laid out all the teachings in jigsaw, so you see where they fit in. And it's probably a little strange, but I put like 150 slides in here. So exactly what is concentration? Here you see the eightfold path, so I go through each one of them in turn. So right, mindfulness. Oh, something about the English cricket team. So if you want to know what all of these different elements were, what is right effort, I go through slide after slide after slide and show where it fits in the matrix. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Are we free? I should say I don't do many sutta. Only once did I attempt to do sutta classes. And so I'm still finding my way of how to explain it, how to describe it. So you are my guinea pigs. And, find a way to present things that's enjoyable or aids for the understanding. Yeah.
It's very good. It's a very fresh way of presenting.
Okay, good.
Especially yesterday's, where you explain the concept rather than going through line by line.
Right. I always think that I don't think the Buddha was ever talking about anything really complicated. And that's why the suttas were very formulaic. And here it's just like this much line. This is how you get enlightened. It's difficult for us to do. That's hard. But I think the general concepts are reasonably clear from, when you start from the big picture and work to the explanation, it's easy. But if you try and go to all the different definitions of the Pali terms and what does sankhara mean and try to get from that to the big picture, you just get lost. That's what I found.
And I also feel that you have the sufficient knowledge, not just bits and pieces to really understand it.
Yeah.
There must be some kind of rigorous training so that you can understand all the parts, and then it's a bit easier. Because, like, just a presentation like that, there are many steps to get to there. The practice, the eightfold path, the meditation.
Right. Right.
And then finally you can get there. So it's like zoop. It's not that easy.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we all good? We can finish early. So a few more suttas next week. I've actually sent them, so if you want the... you need to talk to me. Okay, so we did pick out some of the suttas and the topics. So, if you're interested, you can get the email about that. Okay, we'll